Well, at last, Zubin, we are so delighted that you come after years and years of discussions and whatnot.
Years and years of your writing to me to come.
Come, yes.
I know.
And years of yours saying, no, I have no time. Anyway, now that you're here, I think we'd love to know what you expected before you came. I said, my gosh, yes, I'm obliging Khushroo. I hope that darn orchestra is any good.
I didn't expect too much because I had not even heard 4 bars of this orchestra playing. I had no recording or anything like that. So from the first rehearsal, I was very pleasantly surprised. Your Maestro Bharat prepared the orchestra, and then you had a young conductor from Thailand who also prepared them. So I'm very grateful.
So we were delighted that you were pleased, because everybody was waiting like a Hitchcock movie to hear your opinion.
No.
So
That way I'm very flexible. If the standard was much lower, I wouldn't have walked away. I assure you.
We are obliged that you are staying out of choice and not out of compulsion.
No.
Going back 82 years, when we were first in Campion School, we saw the progress of your career, we saw the progress of your family life. I still remember your wonderful drawing room, and there was a
pyramid
with a glass on it, and next to it was a piano. And sometimes there were 4 stands with music, Bombay String Quartet on
That's
it.
right.
And I saw them somewhere here. They still exist.
Really?
Yes. And so there was your father, of course. There was, I think, Rusi Modi on viola, and the great cellist
George Lester.
George Lester, and your father admonishing them and teaching them, and we were sitting quietly in the corner. I remember your gramophone near the entrance to the dining room and the loudspeaker behind the piano. Can you talk about those days?
Well, I lived with that gramophone. You can imagine the quality. But I'll tell you what, the quality of those recordings was not optimum. But the music that was played on the recordings by Toscanini, Stokowski, Kusevitsky, and a few records by Furtwängler, I always heard the right tempi. So that when I went to Vienna, I had no sound of an orchestra in my ears because the gramophone that we had no sound in that sense. So you can imagine what happened to my ears when I heard the first performance of the Vienna Philharmonic under Karl Böhm playing Brahms's First Symphony. It was an ear-popping audio experience. I couldn't believe that such a sound existed. And that was the normal sound that was produced by this great orchestra in one of the best halls of the world, the Musikverein. From then on, for about 4 years, I went every night in the standing room, either there or at the opera, and I heard everything under the sun. But I knew most of the music already from Bombay, at least the classical repertoire.
That's right.
All the modern pieces I heard for the first time, that was first time in Vienna. Because modern music was starting to evolve in those days, in the mid-50s. It was not very popular with the public. Some conductors played it.
I must say that I came to see you, I think, in 1956 during the Mozart bicentenary.
I see.
And
I remember you coming. I didn't know the year.
Yeah, and that was the year that all these great orchestras came to Vienna. There was the Concertgebouw, the
Leningrad Philharmonic.
The Vienna Philharmonic, of course, Berlin, etc. And you may not remember, but sometimes we'd hear one movement of the Bruckner at the Musikvereinssaal and go across to the other hall to hear the finale of something or the other. We were fast enough to run.
Yeah.
And you were exceptional in the sense that you introduced me to your friends, but your discipline was such that I have to now go home to study. And I remember that you were not as assiduous for your studies in Campton or St. Mary's.
No.
But when it came to music, you have to go home because you have to be ready the next day.
Yes.
That was a characteristic. And it was out of passion. You may not remember again, but you had dinner with Mr. Swarovski, who introduced your great teacher. And you held him in great regard, I remember, as one of the inspirations and guiding forces of your career. Would you like to say something more?
He came from a long line of great conducting teachers, like Richard Strauss. He was very close to Richard Strauss. And Strauss was a wonderful conductor also. A very economical conductor in the sense he didn't wave his arms around madly as a Bernstein or a Karajan did. And Swarovski came from that school, and I still have that schooling.
Yeah.
I can conduct a whole symphony with just from my wrist. I don't have to. I wave about sometimes when the orchestra needs it. Otherwise, I just don't. And that I got from him, but also musical discipline, formal discipline. As I studied scores even without him, like the later Mahler symphonies, he wasn't around anymore. I still have his structural background, knowledge which he passed on to me. And he spoke to me at length. Even walking through Vienna after classes, he never stopped talking about the analysis of music on the whole.
Yeah.
And I learned from all that. Then, of course, I learned from attending rehearsals, not of his only, but of Carl Böhm. Karajan didn't allow people at his rehearsals. I snuck in sometimes. And once I even asked him, can I please attend this rehearsal of Othello? And he looked at me and he said one word, ausgeschlossen. Out of the question.
Out of the question, yes. Yeah. But you did tell me once that you had a very nice chat with him.
Later on?
Later on,
lot
yes,
of chats.
Yes.
No, I went through Othello with him in Salzburg, and in Vienna he came to my room at the Imperial Hotel, and we went through Tristan. And it's a 4.5-hour opera, can't go through everything, but he gave me a lot of tips, a lot of worthwhile advice. Like the last chord of the second act. He said, this is the best written chord ever.
Yes.
And every time I conduct that chord, I listen to his words, and I listen to see if all the voices are coming out, as Wagner wrote down.
Even there's this chord in the
He had later on, when he had political problems with his orchestra, because there were many people by that time that turned against him, he would sort of cry on my shoulders on the phone for over half an hour at a time.
Really?
Yeah. And he had a very strong guttural voice, so I could hardly understand him sometimes. But we got quite close, I must say.
Tell me something, Zubin. He used to conduct with his eyes closed.
Yes.
And often we read on...
But not opera.
Not
only
opera,
symphony.
No, but symphonies.
Symphony.
But we often read in many of these very erudite books around here that a lot of things are done by the eyes of the conductor.
Yeah, he obviously didn't believe in that. And his orchestra missed that also.
Yes.
But he was very proficient. He never missed a cue. When you watched him, he knew what was going on. There was no charlatanism at all. And then when you heard him conduct opera, like the third act of Siegfried, it was just magnificent. The sound that came out of the orchestra with singers like Birgit Nilsson, etc. It was a lesson every time. And I would go in the standing room with a little score, with a tiny light shining there, and try to follow the score. In those days, I didn't really know him. But then there were great conductors at the opera like Böhm, Joseph Kripps, Rudolf Kempe, that conducted repertoire, and of course Metropolis.
Oh.
To hear Metropolis conducting Electra or Ballo in Maschera, it was an absolute education and a sonic treat. And Metropolis, with whom I was quite close, he was an absolute fanatic of learning things by heart. He would give me a score of Wozzeck and ask me to turn to whatever page I wanted, tell him the page number, and ask him whatever question. So I would ask him, what is the clarinet player? Yeah. And he would know exactly. He was a complete phenomenon. But orchestra loved him too. The first time he came to the Vienna Philharmonic, he knew every single member's name by heart.
Really?
That Karajan didn't know till the end of his life.
Yes. But you know, when Karajan came here to Vienna with the La Scala to do Lucia di Lammermoor.
Lucia.
With Callas and Stefano and the grand. I think one of the great moments in my limited opera going was during the sextet when all 6 of them came to the footlight and launched into Kimi Frena. It was goosebumping.
Yes.
And how the Vienna Philharmonic plays Italian opera.
Oh, yes.
Fabulous.
They are a very flexible orchestra because they play almost without rehearsals with different conductors every night. And the concertmaster conducts very often from his stand.
Your memories of your early career, we'd love to hear how you went. You had some good breaks also.
Well, I was very close to this organization called the Jeunesse Musicale. They gave concerts for young people, but with orchestras like the Tonkünstler, which was, let's say, the 3rd or 4th orchestra of Vienna. So my first concert was given to me by the Jeunesse Musicale with Alfred Brendel as my soloist and all Brahms' program. And you know, I had not conducted the Brahms First Symphony or the first piano concerto. And conducting the first piano concerto is not easy. And I remember taking my little daughter in the pram to the Stadtpark, to the city park, with the score in my hand, parking her in the sunlight and you know, assiduously studying the score. I had a recording of Leon Fleischer with George Zell.
Yes.
Which was musically wonderful recording. So I would study at the park, go home, and listen to the record of what I had just studied. So I was quite prepared, and Brendel, who was already quite known by then, was very impressed by the way I accompanied him, and he started praising me to the musical community. And I had good reviews, and he played magnificently. And we were friends until he decided to stop playing. Alfred Brendel is one of the great pianists from whom I learned a lot, because I not only did the Brahms concertos and most of the Beethovens, but I also did the Schoenberg piano concerto with him, which I had no idea about. And he taught it to me. So that was my startings in Vienna. And then I got a concert almost every season for a couple of years until I went to Montreal. I had been in Tanglewood with Claudio Abbado, and we both won prizes there. And a German agent got a hold of us. He was the head of an artist agency and managed people like Klemperer, George Zell, Chalibidake, etc. He heard me in Tanglewood and asked me if he could work for me. Of course, I said yes. And he got me my first engagement with the CBC Symphony, the Radio Television Orchestra of Toronto. And I went there and I had, I have to think, my program was Beethoven's Third Piano Concerto with Rudolf Firkushny, a very good Czech pianist, and Petrushka, which I chose. And I was quite confident that Petrushka is not easy to conduct. That went well. There were no reviews because it was just a radio performance. But the manager of the Montreal Symphony heard about my success there. And that summer, when Markevich canceled his performance with the Montreal Symphony because he was sick in Paris, Pierre Beik, the manager of the Montreal Symphony, called me to take his place. I was doing nothing in Vienna. I went over, and whilst I was conducting in Montreal, they found out that Markevich was not sick at all, that he was conducting in Paris. So Pierre Beik told him, really, we would never want to see you again. And he offered me the job as music director. I was completely jobless in Vienna with 2 children. I accepted on the spot.
Of course.
So that's how I got my first job in Montreal. Then Los Angeles followed, etc.
What happened? When was Dutoit there? He was there before you or after?
Much after.
Talk a little bit about your brother. How
my brother listened to as many records I did. So he was musically trained by ear. And my brother became a London-trained chartered accountant. As I was asked to be a doctor by my mother, he was sent to be, he went to Sydenham College and then to London.
Yes.
But he was always interested in the Montreal Symphony, not when he, of course, came to concerts, etc. He offered to work for them as an advisor only. And he did so well that they offered him to be manager. He left, in those days, a high salary, $80,000 a year, Coopers and Lybrand, and became managing director of the Montreal Symphony for almost half the price.
Now that was interesting in the sense that here you were the music director and your brother was the general manager.
Not with me.
He was never
never
coincided with you.
Never with me.
Ah, yes. And he had a big TV set in his room so that he could see what was going on the stage.
And watch cricket.
Yes.
I phoned him last night after our dinner and he was watching India against Ireland.
Yes, this love of cricket. I remember we went and saw so many matches in the Parsi Gymkhana.
That was the Pentangular.
That's right, yes. You retain your love for cricket to such an extent that during the interval when you were here with some orchestra or the other, you kept running to your dressing room to find out what the score was.
Probably.
There you are.
But you know, my father was a very fine cricketer himself, apart from being a violinist. My father went to Sydenham College also.
Really?
And graduated. And he played for Sydenham College with Vijay Merchant as captain. And we have, I don't know what happened to that picture. There was a picture of the Sydenham College cricket team with my father sitting almost next to Vijay Merchant.
Really?
And Vijay Merchant came to see me a few times when I came with an orchestra and played at the Bremen Stadium. He came to say hello to me.
Yeah. But tell us what your highlights of your career that you remember, particularly in Los Angeles or in New York, or when you conducted the Vienna Phil, what stands out in your memory?
I was engaged to conduct them as part of the Vienna Festival, because the Vienna Philharmonic did its own concerts during the winter season. And you won't believe it, I think I was about 25 years old, and my program was Stravinsky Symphony in 3 movements, Bachhaus playing Beethoven's 3rd piano concerto, and Don Quixote with the first cellist. It's a difficult program. I had conducted all 3 pieces already, thank God. First time I conducted the Don Quixote was in Los Angeles, and first time Stravinsky Symphony was in Israel, so I was prepared. And Bachhaus, the great pianist, he hadn't even heard of me, but he treated me very respectfully. And he liked the way I accompanied him, obviously, because I had no problems. He didn't complain about me or anything. And it went well. So that concert remains in my memory for a long time.
You conducted legends like Horowitz.
And Heifetz.
Heifetz, I saw that also, yes.
Heifetz played once with me, and it was the opening of the Los Angeles Music Center. Heifetz was a very price-consuming, price-saving person. So when Mrs. Chandler, our chairperson, asked him for $25,000 donation as a founder, and he said, no, but I'll open your hall for you.
Oh.
So she, of course, our chairperson of the board invited my father for lunch. And they had lunch, and also a lady, a friend of Mrs. Chandler. And my father asked her, excuse me, why are we having this lunch? And she says, well, I have a message from Mr. Heifetz. He wants your son to use the music when he accompanies him at the concert. So my father said, why don't you ask him yourself? No, I want to go through you. I went to Heifetz's house. He played the whole Beethoven concerto for me, from beginning to end. And I took the score and I followed. Then he came to the rehearsal. I put the score in front of me. And after the end of the rehearsal, which went very well, he gave the orchestra some advice, me, also myself, etc. But he behaved like a gentleman. I said, at the end, is everything all right, Mr. Heifetz? He says, no. I said, what happened? He said, you didn't turn the pages. So I put the score there in the concert, and I turned all the pages, which I was not used to at all.
Well, why did he
in
want
a
to say
concerto?
That?
Well, he wanted nobody to upstage him.
Oh, I see.
Because he had come to different concerts of mine before, where I had not used the music accompanying well-known concertos. And he paid me no compliment after the concert,
really?
But he told the lady who had lunch with my father, tell him he did well. He was that way.
Yeah, of course, well known.
But then I did so many concerts with Milstein, also Menuhin. Menuhin was not always at the top of his form, because he had problems with his right arm. But he was so kind at rehearsals, and he had such knowledge of what he was, especially concertos like Bartók and Elgar, which he had played with the composers themselves, that I learned so much from him.
Yeah.
And the best was Rubinstein. I accompanied Rubinstein every year in Los Angeles, sometimes in Montreal, and every year in Israel. And he even came on tour with us, played with us in Paris, in London, etc. He was a completely angelic person.
He's a wonderful man, yes. He was here for a concert.
Yes.
He came, yeah. You brought a picture to my house once, years ago, of him lying in bed with a table with a glass of champagne and some caviar. He said,
Really?
look at him. I remember you bringing that picture. I wonder whether you still got it to be worth reproducing. Yeah, he was that sort of person. He played at the Metro Cinema here, incidentally,
I see.
because there was no hall.
And he was very close to Daniel Barenboim.
Yeah.
So Daniel, of course, played with me every year with every orchestra.
Yes, indeed.
Then came the younger soloists, Itzhak Perlman and Zuckerman. Perlman substituted for Milstein in Montreal, and Zuckerman also in Israel played for somebody. And they became regular members and friends. We are still all great friends. We never had an argument, never, all these years.
You could see in that film of yours, in the quintet film.
Quintet, yeah. Yeah. Has that been ever shown in India?
I think most of us have seen it, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know about having been shown.
It won every
public.
prize in cultural television, every prize.
Yes.
Because
you're
there
playing
was
the
the
violin
great
in it, yeah.
Jacqueline Dupre. To sit next to her and play was
She was something else, yeah.
Oh.
What did you think of the response of our public to the concert yesterday? Well, the Mahler went like a bomb. Absolutely.
Well, the orchestra played so beautifully, and controlled and disciplined. One day I would like to do the Rite of Spring here.
Yeah, you can. How did you come to opera? Because I never saw so much of that in your home.
No, my father had no interest or no knowledge. There was not a single recording of an opera in my house.
That's right.
I heard opera for the first time. You know, I had a cousin in Vienna, Dadi, who was a really very fine pianist. And he was there before me. And the day after I arrived in Vienna, he had tickets for me for Fidelio with Karl Böhm. In those days, the Vienna Opera had not been completed after being bombed in the war. So this was Theater an der Wien, a beautiful, smaller opera house where Fidelio was first performed.
Yeah.
And so I was there at the opening night of the newly built opera house, also Fidelio. It was a great festival where Kubelik conducted Aida, Fritz Reiner conducted Meistersinger, and then Böhm did Frau ohne Schatten and Wozzeck.
Well,
so it was a wonderful festival.
very, very modern.
And
yes.
we were not allowed in those days to attend rehearsals at the opera house. We went to a lot of rehearsals in both the Musikverein and the Konzerthaus, but not at the opera house. That happened a little later.
You know, there's this popular conception in many countries, including India, that this is a very esoteric form of music and it's not popular. And why should we have Western music? This is the extreme view, when we've got our own wonderful music.
Well, they are right. They have their
true.
own wonderful music.
But then, why are there 1,000 orchestras in the world in every continent? Who can answer that? Right from Africa to South America to New Zealand to Australia. Everywhere there is, and now China. Just
China,
look at Japan.
China has 3 orchestras and 3 opera houses in Shanghai alone.
When do you think that will ever happen here?
They have so much money to spend. I'm doing a Aida in October in Beijing, which I did 5 years ago, with a great Italian set designer, Frigerio, and his wife, Squarzapino, who has 2 Oscars in Hollywood for costume design. That's a magnificent production. And the Chinese people went completely crazy. It was so beautiful. and we had good singers.
We were watching one day, the cello school was being inducted. I've never seen so many cellists. There were 200 cellists who went to the school. Yeah, they had a real mass production. China Philharmonic is supposed
you know,
to be-
Lang Lang comes from a small town in the north,
Yes.
from Manchuria. And I said, you know, why? How did you come to piano in Manchuria? He says, in my town, everybody plays the piano.
Yeah, yeah. And Japan, again. I remember.
Oh, Japan, yes.
They adored Karajan. No? My gosh, he was.
No,
Yesterday, the Japanese consul came to me. He is a fanatic lover of music.
I'm sure.
And he said, oh, I am now crazy. I come tomorrow also, but I want little better ticket. I said, in our hall, everything's a good, better ticket. So he's a lovely man.
During the COVID period, Japanese audiences were asked not to shout bravo. They had to keep quiet.
Why?
Because it was, you know, they would spread the sickness.
Oh, they would
thought.
spread the thing.
No bravo.
But what is it so fascinating about this music, about opera, that attracts people from myriad cultures? What do you think that it draws? It tugs at your heartstrings, or does it satisfy your cerebral responses?
Well, it's first of all the music itself.
Yeah.
People love the music that's played from the pit.
Yes.
Then there are favorite singers. Who is singing Salome tonight?
Yeah.
Who is singing Salome? The next night somebody else sings. So of course they all go again to hear the next Salome.
Yeah.
That's something you should do here.
The Salome.
Salome. That's
You
not.
can't do it.
It's not difficult to put on.
I see you that you're happy when you come to Bombay. I think you have a kind of a coming home feeling
Absolutely.
every time.
Absolutely.
And
Even though we went the other day to see my home,
yes,
my ex-home on Cuff Parade,
yeah.
and even though it was dilapidated and run down, I was very happy to be there. I saw at least my parents' bedroom intact from outside. The windows were still
In
there.
the picture we took, you could see your
Yes.
bed. Yeah.
And my father had designed the front door, which the people there still kept. I saw a little bit of that.
Here, of course, the situation is that without Dr. Baba's legacy, this wouldn't have been possible.
Yes, of course.
So what has been your experience with Dr. Baba before I came? Did you
Well,
meet
he
him?
was always very kind, and he wanted to greet each orchestra, which of course I invited him,
Yeah.
but he didn't interfere with programming or anything
No.
like that.
No, he wouldn't do that.
He was always very enthusiastic.
He was a wonderful man, yes.
And I couldn't really tell the orchestra in a few words who he was
Yeah.
and whose brother he was, you know. There was never any time for that.
All I can say, Zubin, is that we are so over the top that you've come here and that you've cooperated so well, and you've been like an old friend,
I'll be back.
not the great maestro that so many people pretend they are. And some of them are much lesser than you, but they feel much more important. And that's the quality. I think it's the education at St. Mary's and your home that has built that great character. Thank you, Zubin. It's been a delight.
It's been a delight for me.
No.
Thank you very much.
And come back soon.
I will.